Mi nessuno nama was Yakallud. Mi sonus nama was Akald. My son's name was called. The most common vowel in English is often overlooked, partly because it doesn't have a single letter associated with it in the writing system. The vowel is as in about, occur, Lennon, the, salmon. It's overlooked by a lot of us because it only occurs in unstressed syllables, at least in my accent, and it's so common because it occurs in such a large percentage of those unstressed syllables. It's the most relaxed possible vowel in terms of tongue posture. You don't have to extend your tongue very forward or back or high or low in order to produce it. So how did this vowel get into English, and how long has it been here? Well, if you know much German, you might be tempted to assume this is a Germanic thing, because High German, the standard dialect, has a similar tendency to English to use this sound as a kind of catch-all vowel for unstressed syllables. Gemüse, Heiße, Ecke. So if English and German are very closely related and they both have a similar tendency to use as the kind of default vowel in unstressed syllables, does that then suggest that the presence of goes back to the English-German split? Would early medieval English people have been saying Ich hatte, mein Name? Or alternatively, did English and German both develop this tendency separately, independently of each other? Well, we obviously don't have any audio recordings, but we do have lots of written documents in Old English, the period of English spoken before about 1100 AD. And this is good because Old English spelling was not standardized. There was no kind of dogmatically enforced standard spelling system as there is in modern English. And so people's own regional accents, people's own pronunciation more heavily influenced their spelling choices, meaning that we can learn about their pronunciation from the way they spelled things. So if we look at Old English texts, we find that there still wasn't a single letter that represented the sound as far as we can reconstruct. But Old English did still have unstressed syllables, it did have unstressed vowels, and they had to be represented in writing somehow. And this is our first big clue. In Old English, unstressed vowels tended to be systematically represented using different letters, and by systematic I mean it wasn't random. The word nama was usually spelt with a word final A. The word wudu was usually spelt with a word final U. The word harte was usually spelt with a word final E. If Old English speakers were pronouncing all of these unstressed vowels as just nama, wude, harte, then we would expect either that they would settle on one letter, as German has done, that they will be spelt with an unstressed E, or that they would randomly mix them up because speakers didn't have a genuine pronunciation difference to anchor a spelling difference to, if you see what I mean. But what we actually find is that Old English writers systematically spelt these unstressed vowels differently, as if they did have a pronunciation difference that they were anchoring their spelling to. So this strongly suggests that, at least in the early and middle Old English periods, these unstressed vowels had not collapsed together into an sound yet. Nama, harte, wudu, dogga, dahul, huzes, shipa. It sounds more like Hungarian or Polish than modern English. But in the late Old English period, 1000 AD or thereabouts, we see the gradual collapse of these unstressed vowels in exactly the way I've just described. Writers start failing to distinguish them in spelling. Instead of seeing lorkath, hervod, sunu with 3 different unstressed vowels, we start to see lorkath, hervod, sunna, all spelled with a final letter E, like in modern German. But, you may ask, how do we know that this is a central vowel rather than the usual vowel associated with this letter, which at that time was e? How do we know it wasn't lorketh, herved, sunne? Well, I'm not sure that we do know for certain, but a couple of lines of evidence favour a more central vowel. For one thing, this spelling change applies systematically to unstressed vowels, which implies that the fact that they were unstressed was instrumental in causing the underlying sound change. Unstressed vowels in modern English tend to be pronounced more quickly or otherwise with less emphasis than stressed ones, and this makes for a very convenient explanation as to how and why they collapsed together in late Old English. In rapid conversational speech, people pronounce these unstressed vowels with more and more relaxed tongue positions until they all converged at the most relaxed possible one, somewhere around So by 1100 or so, the start of the Middle English period, most unstressed vowels at the ends of words had collapsed into something like nama, woulda, sunna, harta. So we arrive at around 1300 AD, with the Middle English pattern well established. When people are doing caricatures of Middle English pronunciation, one thing they often do is add little unstressed vowels to the ends of words, as in Bill Bailey's Chaucer pub gag. This is a fossil of the old word final unstressed vowels, the sound that appeared at the ends of certain words. But in real Middle English, of course, these sounds weren't just tagged randomly onto the ends of words as an affectation. They had a function, and there was a right and a wrong place for them. The word sunne had this word final unstressed vowel, and the word man didn't, unless it was the indirect object of a verb, in which case it could do. Manne. The man geth to the manne. Richard Jordan points out that there is some spelling evidence that the exact sound of this unstressed vowel differed from dialect to dialect in later Middle English. In the north it was probably more like I, name, wurde, whereas in the south it may have been more like name, wurde. In 1300 there were still some words that retained strong vowels in unstressed syllables where they would be weak today. Abbot, bullock, thousand, rather than abbot, bullock, thousand. This is suggested by the fact that the spelling of the unstressed vowels in these words doesn't collapse to just the letter E, and also from some rhyming evidence highlighted by Jordan. Sometimes unstressed vowels appeared in the first syllable of a word in prefixes. Again, it seems most likely that these hadn't completely collapsed to by 1300. Some are consistently spelled with A, like abut, away. Others are spelled with I, as in beginnen. But a less familiar type of prefix to us might be the I prefix, as in iboren, irreve. This was a very versatile prefix that's almost completely disappeared in modern English. It's the English equivalent of the German prefix ge, as in gegangen, gemacht. This prefix disappeared before 1600, except maybe in the West Country where I think it held on for longer. But in Middle English it was fairly consistently spelled with the letter I, suggesting a quality like I. The one word I can think of where I still use this prefix in my English is enough, and for me that's still pronounced with an I today. I say enough, not enough. There's another place where the unstressed vowel plays an important role in modern English speech: unstressed function words. Certain small function words, when they occur in an unstressed position within a sentence, can be reduced in certain ways, kind of collapsed down. And one of the ways they can be collapsed down is by having their vowel change into We don't say, for example, I am going to take him to the shop. We say, I'm going to take him to the shop. A quick aside, I think I've used this example in a few videos, and I recently clicked on a Tom Scott video and discovered that I have either coincidentally or unconsciously stolen it from him, so I apologise, Tom. I promise this was somehow not deliberate. There are a few different kinds of reduction at play there, but one of them is that the words gonna, the, t, all have this vowel in them instead of their usual strong vowel, their usual kind of full vowel quality. So was this kind of thing happening yet in 1300? Well, spelling evidence from Middle English amply shows that unstressed function words were subject to some kind of vowel reduction. Vowels that were historically long were shortened. So, for example, Old English us, an, butan gave later Middle English us, an, but. So you had short vowels instead of long vowels in those words. There is some evidence for vowel quality changes in these unstressed words as well, albeit sporadically and ambiguously. The strongest evidence is in certain kinds of contractions. Wiltu could be contracted to wilter. Thenkestu could be contracted to thenkeste. It's not unusual for this to be shown in spelling. There are a few possible interpretations of this evidence. One, that function words usually didn't have their vowels collapsed to except in limited situations like pronouns being clicked onto verbs. Or, two, that it was fairly common to collapse the vowels in these words to but that it wasn't represented very often in spelling because the writer would have been aware of the strong form of that word. In rapid speech, people may have used weak forms, to gon, to tun, but in the slow process of writing a sentence out, the writer may have used the strong form as their reference for the spelling. To, gon, to, tun. Forms like wilter and thenkester may have become formalized as contractions which writers found acceptable to spell out, in much the same way that a lot of people will write gunna now, at least in informal communications. Even if there were more weak forms than the spelling evidence suggests, it's not exactly clear which words they were allowed in. In my English, some unstressed function words can take reduced forms and others can't. But what about new words that are in the process of entering the language? I'm thoroughly unconvinced I'm in focus. But what about new words that are in the process of entering the language? Middle English saw a gradual influx of French loan words that obviously had their own vowels in French. And these obviously had to be shoved into the Middle English phonological system. Nowadays, these words are deeply enough embedded in English to have had a lot of their unstressed vowels just collapse. Richard Jordan gives the examples of the words battle and sudden, where in a lot of cases we don't even say an we don't say battle, sudden. We just reduce the vowel to nothing and have a syllabic consonant, battle, sudden. Well, the process of French loanwords coming into Middle English seems to have been somewhat messy, and there was a lot of rearranging of where the stress was. In a lot of cases, vowels that ended up not having the main stress in English still carried a secondary stress, which meant that the vowel in that syllable was allowed to be a proper vowel. So, for example, labur instead of laber, empire instead of emper. And some of these words still have that full vowel quality now. We say empire, not emper. But on the other hand, we now say labour, not laybauer. So, in general, in Middle English, it seems as though certain vowels were starting to collapse to something like but it hadn't gone anywhere near as far as it has in modern English. I'd like to pause for a moment to talk about our production company, Lipmouth Studios. We're independent filmmakers, and I find that our creative interests often align with the kinds of things I talk about on this channel. For example, we're soon to release Living Memory, a web series, a historical web series that aims to explore previous decades through a naturalistic social lens. We recently released a short film called Freedom of the Press, which is a proof of concept for a feature film we're currently developing about the paparazzi. And last year I released The Mystery of the Romans, another feature film which got a lot more positive reviews than I was expecting it to, so thank you very much for those. That's not all we do, of course. My close friend Scott Birchall has released several short films, including 2 set in different parts of the US, and Mark Micko is currently working on a short film which I'm very excited about. Marketing films on YouTube can sometimes feel like a bit of a fool's errand, so if anyone has a moment to watch any of our films, give feedback, it would be very much appreciated. We thank you for your time. Thank you for putting up with this promo as well, and now let's get back to the video. As Middle English turned into early modern English, many of these sounds were lost. For one thing, they started dropping off the ends of words. This had already happened in the north in the 1200s, and it now happened in the south through the 1300s and 1400s. Name became nam, sunne became sun. We can tell this both because people started dropping it from the spelling where it would historically have made sense, and also because they started adding it to words where it historically didn't make sense. So how does that work? Well, imagine this. If you're a scribe in the 1300s and you want to write the rat geth to the manne, it's easy. Rat is spelled R-A-T, R-A-T, and manne is spelled M-A-N-N-E, the double N to show that the A is a short vowel, and the E to represent the sound at the end. Now let's say you're a scribe writing 150 years later, and you want to write the man geth ut. You've read dozens of old texts, and you've seen these old writers adding random E's to the ends of words. You assume it's some stylistic flair, just part of the art of writing, so you decide to spice things up by writing this. You aren't saying manne or ute, because from your perspective, why would anyone say those words like that? But you decide to spell them like that because adding E's to the ends of words seems to be the kind of thing that proper writers do. Final E passes from being a functional thing that actually represents a spoken sound to being just a decorative part of writing. However, human brains are very good at learning patterns, and even after the pronounced final sounds disappeared from these words, there was still some leftover statistical pattern. You see, for historical reasons outlined on screen if you want to pause if you're interested, words that contained a long vowel in the stressed syllable very often ended in a loose unstressed vowel. These late Middle English writers were of course still saying the long vowels even if they weren't saying the final unstressed vowels anymore. So when they read all of these final E's in old texts, it came to be assumed that these final E's were not representing their own sound, but were a diacritic marker telling you that the main vowel in the word was long. English speakers still have a version of this intuition today. This word feels like it should be pronounced dab. If I add an E to the end, I don't feel that it becomes dabbe, I feel that it becomes dabe. We interpret the final E as a diacritic marker telling us how the main vowel should sound. People seem to have settled on this intuition by about 1500. So this loss of word final unstressed vowels once again reduces the frequency of the sound in English. And it's after this, after about 1500, that we start to get more explicit phonetic descriptions from the time. So maybe they can help us glean something about the situation around the time Shakespeare was writing. The linguist Roger Lass leans on the side of there being relatively little vowel reduction in the 1600s. Phonetic descriptions written at the time are often fairly precise about vowel qualities and articulations, but they don't tend to mention any kind of sound. They don't say that unstressed vowels collapse into a common central vowel. They tend to treat unstressed vowels as having qualities that are equivalent to those of the stressed ones. That doesn't necessarily mean that they were all full, peripheral, strong vowels. It could mean that they were kind of centralized and weaker vowels, but obviously similar to the corresponding strong vowel. Spelling had calcified a little bit more in the 1600s, so it could be that people were just using a common unstressed vowel like we do now, but not recognizing it. Or it could be, as Roger Lass suggests, that they were in fact using full peripheral vowel qualities in these unstressed syllables. Through the 1700s, we get more explicit commentary that once again unstressed vowels are beginning to collapse together. So in Abraham Tucker's 1773 book, Vocal Sounds, he explicitly says that very small particles spoken hastily scarce ever retain their original sound. And he writes out a passage of text and marks all of the vowels that would normally get reduced to in his accent. It may have been slightly lower and backer in tongue position, maybe something more like 'Tis frivolous to endeavour putting man or woman upon never stirring in London, for fear of their clothes being covered with soot. For comparison, I was born in 1998 in southeastern England, and I would say 'tis frivolous to endeavour putting man or woman upon never stirring in London for fear of their clothes being covered with soot. So, contrary to earlier periods, Tucker actually had more instances of this weak vowel than I do. Some of these are easy to explain. As I said, different accents can weaken different function words. He says upon, where I would say upon, even in weak position. He says where I would normally say or, even in weak position. Maybe I'd shorten the vowel a little bit, but I wouldn't go all the way to But the more interesting point is that he uses even in some stressed syllables. He uses it basically where I would use the vowel in cut, run, butter. Historically, and in some modern dialects, the words stirring and soot can also have the cut vowel, which is why he uses it in those. For me, stressed and unstressed are two different vowels which sound different, But in many dialects of English, they can be analysed as the same. The weak vowel has merged with an existing stressed vowel. Many Americans, for example, perceive the vowel in cut as being phonemically the same as the vowel at the start of about. Tucker was from London, but clearly had the same kind of system that a lot of modern Americans have there. Tucker's system seems to form a fairly neat precursor to the modern general American system, where there's widespread neutralization of unstressed vowels to something like which is perceived by speakers as being the unstressed version of the vowel in cut and run. But there is an extra wrinkle in the American system. Sometimes the unstressed vowel shows up as something more like I. Americans don't generally say chicken, sicken, they say chicken, sicken. Some linguists would analyse this as just being a realisation of the unstressed It just becomes more like I when it's next to an N. But I think my friend Dr. Jeff Lindsay has said, either in person or in a video, sorry if I'm wrong, Jeff, that some Americans perceive this unstressed I as actually being the unstressed version of the kit vowel. So maybe General American doesn't have any unique vowel phoneme that can occur in unstressed syllables, but unstressed syllables will take either the unstressed version of the cut vowel or the unstressed version of the kit vowel, depending on phonetic context. But in my part of England, things have gone in a slightly less clear direction. As I said, the unstressed vowel to me doesn't feel much like the cut vowel. If anything, in certain situations it can feel more like the put vowel. If I was saying the word situation very carefully, I might say situation, defaulting to the put vowel in the unstressed syllable, shun. But really, if I'm being honest, it doesn't feel like any of the stressable vowels, it just feels unique. However, having said that, the kit vowel does quite often occur in unstressed syllables in my accent, just with less regularity than in American English. For example, the word chicken has the kit vowel twice, chicken, and the word sicken has the kit vowel only once, sicken. I've pointed this out in previous videos, and although the difference is very obvious and contrastive to me, I've had comments saying that I'm hallucinating it, but I actually don't say those two unstressed vowels differently. Fair enough, we all have our own phonological systems, so I've dragged my sister in as a guinea pig again. Hazel, tell me about the historical figure with the surname Lennon.
John Lennon.
Yeah.
He was in the Beatles and he got assassinated.
Tell me about the historical figure with the surname Lenin.
Lenin?
Yeah.
I don't know much about him.
Okay, that's all right. Are the two words different?
Yes.
Why are they different?
Lennon and Lenin.
Mm-hmm. And what is the meaning of the word wall?
Wall.
Yeah.
Like a barrier.
Yeah, okay. What's the meaning of the word sicken?
Is that a word?
Does it remind you of any words?
Not really.
What about the word sicken?
Oh. To make someone sick.
So in my kind of accent, there is a phonemic contrast between unstressed and unstressed I. This is recognised by linguists, but when linguists talk about it, they sometimes do so in a way that I find a bit confusing and mysterious. They describe accents like General American as having a weak vowel merger, and they describe my kind of accent as not having that merger, which is why chicken and sicken still don't rhyme for me. But the use of the word merger implies that at some historical stage, ancestral to mine and, to my dialect and General American, that the original system was my one, effectively. The original system had chicken not rhyming with sicken. And yet, when I look back to Middle English, when I look at Middle English sources, common consensus seems to be that those words that don't rhyme for me did already rhyme in Middle English in 1300, say. So where does the merger come in? That may be a topic for another video, because this one's getting quite long. Thank you very much to everyone for watching. Again, I'll recommend our films if anyone's curious or wants to give them a chance. I'll put the link to our website in the description. Our web series, Living Memory, historical web series, will be coming out on this channel soon. Thank you very, very much to everybody who subscribes or donates to my Patreon. And yeah, I'll see you on the next one. And I can actually see you through the camera, so stop doing that, Aaron. Yes, it may seem implausible, but I actually am talking to you.
Perfect.